This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. Use the code KENOBI at checkout or the link in the description to get 5% off your order and to help support the show. Hi, I'm Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. I come from a country where we like to put people who were born into hereditary power on a pedestal and parade them through the fucking streets in spite of the increasing level of poverty in my country. Today is a bit of story time with PleasantKenobi, with Big Papa PK, where I'm going to tell you an anecdote that I've told on stream a couple of times. I may have said it, maybe even on some podcasts before. I think I've told this a lot to people because I find it funny, but I also find it interesting because it brings up an interesting conversation. So kick back, get yourself a cup of tea, a cup of hot cocoa, a coffee. I was going to call this morning and actually have my coffee with me, but it's in the afternoon, I'm drinking water now. Hydration. Our story takes place when I was a bit of a different Magic player to what I am now. We're talking around 8 years ago. At the time, I was playing weekly Commander games, but then I decided to get into 60-card competitive games, or formats, should I say. Yeah, that's right, I got into Standard. I collected Shocklands from RTR Block and I built Abzan Reanimator, which was Unburial Rites, Crater Hoof Behemoths, and Lingering Souls. It also had Thragtusk and Restoration Angel. The deck was... It was wonderful. I really want to put it back together and play it through a modern league sometime. Tell me in the comment section below if you'd like me to play some of my old favourite standard decks and get smashed in modern. Isn't that interesting that Griselbrand was in the format? I think it was a one-of sometimes in some of the lists, but you were better off reanimating Angels of Sanctity and Crater Hoofs over Griselbrand. Isn't standard wild sometimes? I'm not that keen on standard anymore. When we got to Khan's block and two of my favourite decks had rotated out and I couldn't find something that resonated with me, I moved on to other formats, namely modern and then onto Legacy from there. When my beloved Crater Hoofs rotated out of the format, we got new toys in Theros block with Elspeth Sun's Champion, a big splashy white planeswalker that convinced me to move across to Control. And whilst Elspeth was fun, the best card at the time, and perhaps the worst card in Standard depending on who you ask, was Sphinx's Revelation. Oh my god, I miss this card. It came to Historic, it's in Modern still, but it's just not good enough for either format. There's nothing quite like tapping out, gaining 4 life, drawing 4 cards, untapping. So you do that in their end step, you untap, and your hand is just full of answers. Maybe you've got so many resources you have to cast some of them because you don't want to discard end of turn. Because of Crater Hoof and Co rotating out of Standard and me being on Esper, I got into a habit of playing a lot of events at weekends, just going out of my way, travelling to places to play PTQs and GPTs and whatever the fuck was available. It might have been PPTQs, I can't remember. I was a regular at FNM for both Standard and Limited, and the reason was I wanted to get as many reps in with this deck before inevitably it rotated again. However, life got in the way and I didn't play as much as I wanted to going through Theros. Then rolled around Core Set 2015, the last set before we move on to Khans of Tarkir and we rotate out all of Return to Ravnica. That's right, my friends. My favourite Standard deck was going to rotate again. And I never really recovered from that with Standard. I kind of got sick of the fucking thing. So when 2015 dropped and game day was happening, I hit up my local on Saturday. It was your Portsmouth or Southampton. I don't remember the Saturday that well. I remember a certain part of the story time more than others. But I went to the game day and I came second or third. Got some boosters. I was happy with my result, but I wanted to win. I wanted to win this illustrious playmat. If I'm honest, the first place playmat for this game day sucks. I don't like light-coloured playmats. Magic 2015 is a shit set name. And I bet none of you know what this art is from. Do you know what this art is from? Let me show you the card. The card is Spirit Bonds. Honestly, does anyone remember this card? Feel free to pause the video at this point and type in the comments down below what you think Spirit Bonds does. I reckon less than 5% of the people watching this video will know what this fucking card does. I'll pause now and then I'll show you it. Here is Spirit Bonds. This is what the card does. How close were you? I couldn't remember when I was actually writing up some notes to this video. I couldn't remember. I'm sure someone had killed me, or more people killed me with this in Standard and White Weenie, but I did not remember what this did. Crazy, isn't it? All the Magic cards we see and we play with, and they move past us. We forget about them. Days gone by. The Magic cards of old. So I didn't win the playmat. That's where we're at in the story. So, much like most Magic players, my desire to win outstripped my desire for social life, and I hit up the Sunday event as well. I don't think my girlfriend and now wife, girlfriend at the time, wife now, was mad about that, but I don't remember that bit. So I head over to Newbury to play in game day number 2 of the weekend, where it went pretty well. Got to the finals. Sphinx's Rev was doing me well, as was Bloodbound of Vizkopa, and of course Elspeth. My opponent was one of the regular like Newbury scene that I still know to this day and still see around and stuff. I don't remember which one it was because unfortunately their actions in this story aren't the important bit. It's not them that made the accusation. My opponent was on some form of, I think it was blue-red tempo. Again, the deck they were playing is largely irrelevant, but the card they were playing is, to an extent. They're playing Young Pyromancer. I remember the games being close, and I remember us both being elated at how close and how fun the games were afterwards when we discussed them. One of the key things, though, was that my opponent got nervous, and they missed some of their Pyromancer triggers. If you are quite casual to Magic, or you don't play any competitive events or whatever, you might not understand what I mean by that, so allow me to explain. Young Pyromancer has a triggered ability. When you meet the triggering requirement, you put a triggered ability onto the stack. And then if no one has any responses, the trigger resolves, and then we get the effect. In this case, whenever you cast an instance or sorcery, you get to make a 1/1 elemental. My opponent cast some cantrip of some kind at some point. I think it was actually in game 3. I think they were nervous, or it'd been a long day. Maybe they'd done 2 game days as well. They're all magicked out. But they missed the trigger, and I remember noticing it, and it was good for me because it reduced their clock. And they missed it again, and I think there might have been up to 3 missed triggers in that game. I go on to win, and the playmat is mine. That said, it's in storage right now. It might be in that cupboard behind me. I love you, comment section and viewers, but I couldn't be fucking bothered to root for that cupboard through my hundreds of playmats to find this one. So here's the image again. So after the game, me and my opponent are chatting, and we're both really elated about how good those games of Magic were. Because when Magic's good, it's real good. I do a thing that I often do. I ask them if they're not too tilted or frustrated. I say to them, do you mind if I mention something that happened in the game that might help in future? There's something I wanted to talk about. And they say, yeah, of course, hit me. And I explain that they missed 2 or 3 Pyromancer triggers that would have, I don't know if it would have won them the game, but it certainly would have changed how the game played. I probably would have had the verdict to turn earlier to decrease the clock on board or similar. I would have to use my resources differently. At the time, I don't remember if this came up, but I was playing Far and Away, a split card that had an edict effect on it. Target player sacrifice a creature. With less Pyromancer tokens in play, that's a much better spell. My opponent kicks themselves, get a bit frustrated and annoyed, and they realise that it's a learning moment, and you know, they're glad that I brought it up, because they want to learn not to do that in future. At this point, we were being watched. In my head, it was like, I think it was like a dozen people, but it's probably closer to 5 or 6. You know how things get exaggerated in your mind? It has been 8 years. One person, though, sat off to my right, the only person off to the right, who I think has a vested interest in my opponent winning because they're playing the same deck. I might have beaten them in an earlier round, but I don't necessarily recall that. They look horrified after I've explained to my opponent that they missed those triggers. They look like shocked. And being the kind of person that I am, I turn to them and I say, are you okay? What's up? And they say, you cheated. Whoa there, cowboy. Whoa there. I asked them to explain how so. For a brief moment, I think to myself, perhaps, that I've fucked something up. Magic is hard and I'm an idiot, so I often do fuck things up. They say something along the lines of, and I remember being very specific wording of like, you failed to maintain the board state. Now, those words in themselves, what they mean is that we failed to keep the game state flowing within the confines of what the game should have been doing, enacting what cards did and spells did. The other thing that those words reveal, I remember this very distinctly, is that they're quite an entrenched player. Failure to maintain the game state or board state is particular vocabulary that a Magic player would use to describe the situation in a game of Magic. This person wasn't necessarily a newbie or wasn't fresh to the game, shall we say. They were incorrect, because they were saying it was me letting them miss the triggers and not get the 1/1s from Young Pyromancer. That was not maintaining said board state. In Magic the Gathering, you can miss triggers, but only if they would be deemed beneficial to you. If you miss a detrimental trigger like a Dark Confidant or similar, it will be put back on the stack later. It is not up to your opponent, it's not their responsibility, it is not their fucking duty to remind you to put your triggers on the stack and resolve them. Your opponent does not need to remind you that you have a Sylvan Library in play, they do not need to remind you that you have a card in suspend, and they do not need to remind you that Young Pyromancer has ability text. I explained this to my opponent that within the rules of the game, I do not have to remind my opponent of missed triggers. It's just not part of how Magic at comp level, even the lowest comp level of game day, works. My opponent agrees with me, by the way, And then this outsider says, no, that's not how this works, you're a cheater. I think they said something like it's lame, that's a lame excuse, or it shouldn't work that way. Perhaps I think they realized that I was probably right, but they're frustrated with the situation. I also think they wanted me to lose badly. What can I say? Even back then I had some haters. I explained to them probably quite bluntly that they need to talk to the judge, because I am not going to deal with them being relatively hostile to me about something that I know I'm right on. They talk to the judge confirms what I said, and the person just gives me daggers until we leave. We go for KFC, if I remember correctly, and I actually get quite heated and frustrated that I've been accused of cheating by someone who obviously didn't actually really understand the core rules of the game. Although, let's be honest, when it gets to this sort of granularity, this sort of fucking nuance that isn't the easiest thing to grasp or have all available to you at any time. You can get things wrong. Hell, I haven't played a paper tournament barring some GP side events in 2 years, maybe longer because of COVID. I had to fact check myself on several things in this video with my Discord and some judges on there because I wasn't sure if things had changed or I was misremembering. Magic is hard, and the reason I find the anecdote so interesting is A, it was me dealing with the only situation where I've been accused of cheating in an event. Well, actually, there's 2 situations. I'll say the second one for another storytime video. It's funnier and much more like misunderstanding more so than this. But also, I think it does highlight how complex Magic is, but it also highlights this whole trigger thing and keeping the board state, informing your opponent that they forgot something. If it was an F&M or a lower, I think game day isn't a big deal, right? Game day, I'm playing it up at the beginning of this video, but game day doesn't really matter. But there's something on the line. I think if you're competing to get that mat and anything above there into the GPs and PTQs and Pro Tours and shit, but if you're competing for something on the line like your game day match, you're probably one of those players that knows that you can miss triggers. My opponent knew it, and they were gutted when they've done it. But if this was like an if it's a casual game, I would tell them. If it's F&M, I'm pretty sure, especially since I started to do the channel and became less invested in winning and more invested in the game and the community itself, I would inform my opponent if they missed a trigger because I want them to have a fun time. If they play Magic once a month at F&M on a Friday night down at the university in Southampton, I want them to have fun too. But when it comes to playing at a competitive level or earing into the competitive level, I don't think it's your job to babysit your opponent. Magic is already complex enough, and you can already get too far into the weeds and get tunnel vision and struggle to get through the decisions of a game of Magic without having to also deal with your opponent's stuff that they are meant to be keeping track of as well. However, beyond that, I've played a lot of other games more recently, whether that be Warhammer 40k or board games or other card games over the last couple of years. And it's kind of changed my mentality towards competing in some ways. I still think I'm a competitive person, but I'm less so than I ever was. And I want the other person that is meeting me at an event that's paid an entry fee, that's probably travelled to these things. Game day, not so much, but like a Warhammer 40k tournament, for example, you drive several hours, get a hotel and shit. I want those people to have fun too. At the end of the day, this is a fucking hobby. We should all be enjoying it. So I think it really does depend upon context, right? F&M or casual event, inform your opponent. Hell, in events that are less casual for 40k, I still tell my opponents of stuff because, I don't know, sportsmanship matters more to me than winning, I guess. But at the same time, I do think not informing your opponent of their missed triggers in Magic is perfectly fine in a competitive game. It's a weird one because you also want to win off the back of your opponent not being as good as you, right? You want to outplay your opponent, not have them have a simple fuck up. And when you play Magic the Gathering Online or Arena, you don't have missed triggers because the system does it for you. So you play more of a perfect game. However, sometimes you win on those games where someone gets disconnected, they have to go get the door and they time out, they misclick and just click the wrong button. I do that all the fucking time. So there's like almost like a digital version of this where there is an outside influence to the game that gets you a win. I genuinely believe context is important, but I do find it interesting that in playing other games and engaging with other hobby spaces, my attitude towards this has changed slightly. I do think there's an unsporting aspect to winning through what is essentially an angle shoot but not a cheat. But that said, I do want to clear something up here. There are unsporting conducts within the rules of Magic the Gathering that judges use. So if you are being aggressive towards your opponent or insulting them or swearing in ways that they're offended by or whatever, these are unsporting conducts. I've got a story about a really unsporting conduct that I want to tell in another video. But these are unsporting conducts that can be minors or major, they can lead to penalties, essentially. The unsporting thing I'm talking about is kind of an ethical side. It's kind of a, don't want to sound too pompous here, but it's a philosophical and moralistic sort of standpoint and discussion around whether or not you really want to win because your opponent forgot that young peasy makes you a 1. It's a weird one, right? I hope you found this video at least entertaining or interesting. Please let me know in the comment section below what you think. I don't want to hear if you think it's a cheat, because it's not a cheat. If it's within the rules, it's categorically, objectively not a cheat. But I do want you to tell me, do you think allowing your opponent to miss a trigger is an angle shoot? Obviously, some of you will be competitive gamers, some of you less so. I think it's an interesting discussion around the philosophy behind it. But ultimately, I think this is the cleanest way Magic is at the moment. The current rules are very clean. I do like them the way they are. Either way, let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now, cunts.